Tonight is the right time to look back at a key piece of reporting by the Washington Post during their investigation of the Watergate scandal that brought down President Nixon. And this piece of reporting was disputed by the Nixon White House and used by the Nixon White House to try to discredit all reporting on the Nixon scandals, because this reporting was proved to be wrong, at least in part. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein became two of the most respected journalists in history because of their reporting on Watergate, but they once got a key fact wrong in one story, and it led to an attack from the Nixon White House. In October 1972, they published a piece reporting that Richard Nixon's White House Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman, quote, was one of 5 high-ranking presidential associates authorized to approve payments from a secret Nixon campaign cash fund. According to their report, the fund had been used for payments to the men who burglarized the Democratic National Committee headquarters. The report attributed its information to, quote, federal investigators and accounts of sworn testimony before the Watergate grand jury. And the sourcing was incorrect, as Carl Bernstein later explained on NPR.
We had the story right, the substance of it. What we had wrong was the attribution. It had never come before the grand jury, and it was the substance that was really important. And at the same time, we had not been diligent in nailing this down, this one aspect of it.
And Bob Woodward will never forget what that felt like.
This was one of the real dreary days of our reporting life. In fact, I don't think I've had one that bad, because it was just flat wrong.
But the rest of Woodward and Bernstein's reporting was right. And in the end, Richard Nixon chose to resign the presidency rather than face certain removal from office in an impeachment trial in the United States Senate. Joining us now, David Corn, Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones and an MSNBC political analyst. Also joining us, Elizabeth Drew, a political journalist and an author whose book about Watergate is entitled Washington Journal: The Events of 1973-74. Elizabeth Drew, you were there. You read every one of these accounts as they were emerging in the Washington Post and other reporters' coverage at the time. Did we have, other than this Woodward and Bernstein episode that we now all look back on, were there other such bumps in the journalistic road in covering Nixon in those days and the unfolding of that scandal?
Nothing of that order, Lawrence. I think a little perspective is in order here. Yes, it was a mistake. It was a subject of headlines and head scratching, and nothing a White House that's being investigated. They just love when some mistake is made, because then they denounce all of journalism. Well, look at the end of the story, and in the end, it didn't matter all that much. In a perfect world, no journalist story would ever be wrong at all, but it's going to happen. The question is, do they clean up their act afterwards? I can't tell you how appalled the people at the Post were, and people in the Democratic committee. They were very upset about it. But in the scheme of things, it didn't matter all that much.
David Corn, your reaction to both the BuzzFeed story tonight and its parallels to that Woodward and Bernstein mistake back in their big days of covering Richard Nixon?
Well, now we know that what they reported, Carl and Bob, ended up being true, although, as they note, they got the attribution wrong, and it gave the Nixon White House and their detractors ammunition to go after them. What we don't know yet is whether BuzzFeed got it right, but somehow screwed up the attribution, or there was some miscommunication here. But what we do know, to get to Elizabeth's point, that the big picture remains that Donald Trump himself lied to the American public. He said he had nothing to do with Russia while he was campaigning. Yet there he was pursuing a deal that would have enriched him to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's what Michael Cohen was trying to cover up. He says, he said publicly at his sentencing, in sort of synchronization with what Trump wanted, whether he was directed to do this specifically or not. So the big lie is out there. That's, the big story here. And it's a pity that now we are being distracted by what might have been a mistake by BuzzFeed, or might be an unclear statement by Mueller. But I think at the end of the day, whether we have House Democrats investigating this or Mueller giving us some more information, we will get the truth of what really happened, and that will be the issue, not how it was covered.
And Elizabeth Drew, it might be Ben Bradley who has the very best line about how people out there and editors in these situations should regard developments like this. After reviewing how the mistake was made by Woodward and Bernstein, he had a few words with them about, how they needed to clean up their processes, make sure this would never happen again. And it did never happen again. But he finished that discussion by saying to them, what have you got for tomorrow? And that's what really matters, isn't it?
That's right. Tomorrow's another day and another story and other stories. And I agree with who was just talking that these things happen. They don't happen. The amazing thing is they don't happen very often. I want to point something else out. In Watergate, we had no cable. We had no internet. We had none of the things that go on now. So you have that many more people reporting. And in Watergate, there weren't that many on the story. So I think exponentially, the odds on somebody getting something wrong at some point are all the greater. But keep in mind the big picture. David was right. The big picture is something happened here. We'll find out what it was. But a lot of other things happened, too. Even if this story didn't exist, there's still a very, very big story.
And we all need patience, and we all need to remember the phrase, if true. Elizabeth Drew, David Corn, thank you for joining us in that part of our discussion. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.